So we want to figure out who these later RBs are. You might want to go zero running back. You might want to go hero running back. Let me just explain what zero running back is real quick. When you don't go running back for the first 4 or 5 rounds, and then you try to identify a few running backs who can help you early and some who could potentially break out later in the year, right? These guys likely won't be averaging RB1 points to start, but the goal is to at least grab 1 or 2 top 24 guys potentially. Maybe not ADP wise, but they could end up being that way come week 2 or week 3 based on what we're projecting for them if things shake the right way, right? And then you continue to build that depth at the running back position to give you some chances to hit big on the running back position, while your high-end wide receivers that you drafted in their place can hold it down for you, but also potentially compensate for your weakness at running back. Maybe you draft a tight end early that gives you a massive advantage over the other tight ends. We call it positional advantage, right? That helps you overcome your weaknesses at running back. And then if you have later round running backs that end up hitting, your team can end up being a juggernaut. It definitely takes a little bit of luck, but the skill is identifying 1 or 2 running backs in the draft who end up hitting big late, and then basically you just heavily work the waiver wire after that.
Right. With zero running back, I like to treat it as just playing the lottery at the running back position, because I'm a big wide receiver guy. I prefer wide receivers, and I think that you kind of are that way a little bit too, especially in Dynasty. But when we're talking redraft, like I've always leaned towards the zero running back strategy because I think it's easier to hit on a running back because there are fewer running backs out there. There's more technically good lottery tickets, if that makes sense. Like there's a bunch of receivers. You can take late round receivers. There's so many of them, and it's going to be fluctuating all the time. For me, I'd rather take the chances on a more scarce position at running back because there's always 1 or 2 guys. Like Kyron Williams last year, like he came out of nowhere. Those are the types of players that we're looking for. They don't have to be going like where Kyron Williams was last year. I don't even know if Kyron Williams was being drafted. He was going very, very late in drafts if he was. But it could be guys in the 6th, 7th round. One of the guys that I like this year, Jonathan Brooks, I think that he can really break out. Now, obviously, he's not going super duper late, but what you're doing is you're trying to find assets at running back that can appreciate either very quickly or when it matters, like down the stretch towards the playoffs, when hopefully your wide receivers are carrying you to at least be in contention for a playoff spot. And then once you're in, you're good. That's the way I like to treat zero running back. I'm just playing the lottery at that position.
One of the advantages of this is that you can avoid being hit hard when a running back that you take early gets hurt. It's the position that has the most injuries. So if that running back that you have ends up getting hurt, well, you took him later. So there isn't as much sunk cost when they do get hurt. All right, so let's identify a few running backs that we might consider.
Can I just add on to that quick? Like, if you're playing this game, like I said, taking the late running backs, chances are if another running back gets hurt, you might have stashed like 5 or 6 different handcuffs and players that might end up in a better situation. So not only are you insulated against running back injuries because you drafted them low, you didn't invest a whole lot in them, but you can also benefit from them. You know, obviously other teams, it's that switch of power. You know, obviously the amount of value that you have switches teams when a running back gets hurt. If you draft handcuffs for other players, like it's a fantastic way to go about it. Like there are definitely upsides. There's downsides too, but that's just one of the upsides that you also have, like you mentioned, being insulated against injuries to your players at running back.
Yeah, I think that's a great point that you mentioned, that transfer of power, right, in your league where you end up, you have, you know, maybe the 1B on an offense, or you in a backfield, or you have the handcuff, or the handcuff who's getting a little bit of work, right, on your bench. But then that starter gets hurt. That team just lost one of their top running backs, who they drafted in the first couple of rounds, and now they're really hurt. Meanwhile, you didn't have to worry about that. A player that you picked much later in the draft, more of a lottery ticket, just increased the strength of your team tenfold, right? So I love that point. Now, I want to consider, let's identify a few running backs who we might consider, right? Round 5 or later, using sleeper ADP, all right? And, you know, we're going to kind of go round by round and see, like, you know, are we happy with these guys? Like, who would we be happy with when we're building a zero RB team in each of these rounds? So in the 5th round, you have Kenneth Walker, Alvin Kamara, and Aaron Jones, right? Which of these 3 guys, Zach, would you choose if you have no running backs by the 5th round? Are you looking at any of these guys as the first running back that you're taking off the board?
Right. So assuming this is our RB1, we haven't touched running back up till the
Yes,
fifth round.
correct.
I think the safest pick is Alvin Kamara because of his receiving upside. But I think the pick that I want for upside, because we're playing zero running back lottery ticket, I'm going with Kenneth Walker. I love the offense he's in. I think that they're going to be scoring a lot more points, running at a faster pace. Obviously, he has Zach Charbonnet in the backfield, but we don't know how they're going to treat him. And we're in the fifth round. I have a guy that scored, I think it was it 8 touchdowns last year? He scored plenty of touchdowns last season. I think he has 10-plus touchdown upside. I'm going to go for him, Kenneth Walker, at this point. And you mentioned Aaron Jones. He's in there too. I don't know what this offense is going to look like. I don't know how much I trust Sam Darnold. I don't know how much I trust J.J. McCarthy. There's a whole situation there at quarterback. We know what we're getting with Seattle. At this point, I'm going to go with the guy that has the upside, the touchdown upside, Kenneth Walker.
I still have no problem going wide receiver once again in the fifth round, right? If you have to, right? If I had to choose, like I think Kenneth Walker might be the choice here. Alvin Kamara in a full PPR league, totally get that as well. But knowing me, you know how much I might be drafting. A little bit of different running back who I shall not name because I name him in every single podcast that we do. Kendra Miller.
Right.
Sixth round, James Conner, David
that.
Montgomery. Yep.
You mentioned fifth round, like you said, you would have no problem taking a receiver there. Like, who's a receiver going in the fifth round right now that you might think about taking there? Just a couple names going in the fifth round right now in sleeper. There's George Pickens. There's T. Higgins. There's Keenan Allen. Amari Cooper's one that sticks out to me. He's going 58th overall in the fifth round. So it's like, I would be cool with that. I think that's kind of where I'd be. I don't know how you feel.
Me too. I'm cool with taking Amari Cooper or T. Higgins there. Like, both of those guys would definitely be on my radar, and I'm okay taking another wide receiver in the fifth round and going straight to the sixth round because you have James Conner, David Montgomery, DeAndre Swift, and Ramondre Stevenson. I think all these guys, I'll be happy drafting these guys. Now, I think David Montgomery is probably like, he's safe, right? Like, he's going to score those touchdowns. He's going to give you 10 to 15 PPR points a week, most likely, pretty consistent. I think James Conner probably has the most upside out of all these guys because most likely he's going to be their workhorse. I think it's going to be relatively decent offense in Arizona. So, James Conner, to me, while he's healthy, there's a good chance that he's an RB1, right? For this offense. So, and for fantasy, would you be surprised over the first 5 weeks of the season if James Conner was a fantasy RB1? I think he could be a low-end RB1 pretty easily, right? So That's why, maybe if I have a different type of build coming into the sixth round, I might not go in that direction. Maybe I go with someone like David Montgomery to kind of supplement my team opposed to just going for that ceiling. But because I am coming into this with no running backs, for example, I think James Conner might be that guy. If I'm grabbing my second running back, let's say we grabbed Kenneth Walker in the first, maybe I'm still going James Conner here. But I think David Montgomery is also a pretty decent pick here. Are you? I know you're pretty high on Ramondre. Are you considering Ramondre here over these three guys?
I wouldn't put him over James Conner. I would probably put him over David Montgomery just because I think he has more of the upside. He can have a higher upside on a week-to-week basis. Now, if you want the floor, say you already shot for the sky, shot for the moon, whatever, I'd say Kenneth Walker's, I don't want to say shooting for the moon, but, you're going to have to rely on touchdowns there. If you want a little bit more consistent production, I'd say you want to go David Montgomery. But if you want the higher upside each week with potential to, flame out a little bit, Ramondre Stevenson, he's on the Patriots offense, is still probably going to be bottom 12 this season. That would be my guess, unless Drake May is some revelation. Then maybe I would consider
bottom 12. Hey, listen, if you tell me the Patriots are bottom 12, I'm moving him up in my rankings because I'm looking at them as a bottom 5 offense.
So,
this year.
We've had this conversation in the comments. I was like, I'm Mr. Optimism, I guess, with that offense. But you talk to Joe, he'll tell you even more. He'll be even more optimistic about that.
Yeah, he will. He's a resident Patriots fan. All right, moving to the seventh round here, you have Najee Harris, Tony Pollard, Raheem Mostert, and Zamir White. To me, one name pops out here, and I don't know about you, but Raheem Mostert is almost a smash pick here in the seventh round for me. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of older running backs, this guy finished as the RB3 in points per game last year, whatever it was. Dude is, if he still has it, and he was very efficient last year still, if he still has something left in the tank, and I'm not saying he's going to hold up all season long, but at least to start the year, I think he's a little bit of a smash pick here, isn't he?
Yeah, he has to be. Just based on that upside alone, he's in an excellent scheme with Mike McDaniel. And Devon Achane's there. We know that they drafted Jalen Wright. But Mike McDaniel just came out this past weekend. There was a report. I saw it when I was writing up the newsletter. And it said that he said Raheem Mostert is pretty much leading this backfield right now. So, like you said, if it's going to be just the first couple weeks, like that can change, obviously, over time. Devon Achane is very good. Jalen Wright is very good. And they're going to be throwing to Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle. But if Raheem Mostert is the lead back pretty much, obviously getting more carries, like you can't really go wrong here at 7th-round price. Like, when have you seen a guy score 20 touchdowns and go in the 7th round the next year? Like, that's just crazy to me.
It is. All right, 8th round, Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Moss, Austin Eckler. Another round where one guy sticks out to me like a sore thumb.
Yeah, and I think we're in agreement here. Like, who you going with? Because I have my pick.
You say it, man. You say it. I mean, you've already said it, so that's why.
Yeah, for me, it's Jonathan Brooks. It's Jonathan Brooks. And it's just everybody else is in a situation where I think I can see the backfield being a mess all season. You know what I mean? I don't think any of the other guys have a chance of clearly separating themselves. We're talking about Nick Chubb, Javonte Williams, Zach Moss, Austin Eckler. Like, all of them have circumstances where the other guy is going to be mixing in plenty. Where Jonathan Brooks, I think he can take over the Panthers' backfield. He just has to get healthy. I think he's one of those guys you have to draft him, leave him on your bench, stomach that for a week or two, especially if he's not playing. He might not necessarily be ready. We're not sure where he is in his recovery right now. But as soon as he comes back and he gets healthy, I'm expecting by midseason for him to be taking 65% of the snaps, and maybe even more in the Panthers' backfield.
I wouldn't be scared off if Chuba Hubbard got like 50% of the work, like weeks 1, 2, 3. You know what I mean? Maybe
Right.
the first quarter of the season. Look at what Breece Hall did last year. It was a very similar thing, and we were worried, right? Like these other running backs, getting work. Who was it last year? Was it Michael Carter? Getting some work, alongside
Before he was
Breece
traded,
Hall.
I think so. Yeah.
Yeah, and Israel Abanikanda, he was just drafted, so there was some rumblings about that. Like, oh, is he going to get some work? But Breece Hall ended up taking over, right, once he was fully healthy. And I think it's going to be a similar situation with Jonathan Brooks. He's being taken way too late for a potential workhorse, a very talented workhorse here. I think Javonte Williams can also, that's a real boom-bust type of pick there. I think Jonathan Brooks is a lot safer and also has a near equal type of boom that as Javonte Williams without as much of the risk, in my opinion, even coming off the ACL injury. Okay?
Yeah.
So going into the 9th round, Jalen Warren, Devin Singletary, Trey Benson. I think Trey Benson's going a little too high for me in drafts. He's a handcuff. I think he's very talented. I think if James Conner were to go down, I think Trey Benson 100% has, RB1 type of upside. Think of Kenneth Walker when, who was it that got hurt in front of him? Was it, who was
I don't think we're going back to Chris
ahead?
Carson, are we?
Are we going back to
No.
Chris Carson? We
I don't
might be.
think
I
we
mean,
are.
why did
Really?
I think of Chris Carson?
Why is that the
I
name
also
that
thought of
popped
Chris
in
Carson
mind?
when I mentioned that.
I hear you, yeah.
This is going to be haunting me now. Now I gotta look it up, man. Now I gotta look it up. Kenneth Walker. All right, let's see who was there. Everyone who's listening right now is like, yes, it was Kenneth Walker. You guys are right, but who knows? Let's see. I'm looking at his senior year. It was only 2 years ago, so let's see who it was.
Chris Carson was out before that, I think, unfortunately.
Yeah.
In 2021.
This is
Rashad Penny.
2022,
Penny.
actually.
Rashad Penny. Oh, my God. Was it him?
It was Rashad Penny. Yes, it was Rashad
Yeah.
Penny. Exactly.
Because he was
So
he had a
Rashad Penny got
ridiculous
hurt.
5 weeks. I remember that.
Yeah, exactly. And he got hurt, and it was all Kenneth Walker after that point, right? So despite the fact that they drafted him relatively early, it ended up being him. Anyway, the point is that Trey Benson can have that kind of year if James Conner were to miss some time. Okay, but drafting him as a handcuff this early is a little bit too high to me. I personally rather get Jalen Warren. Here's the thing with Jalen Warren. It's possible that he ends up with 70 targets, 70 catches this year even, right?
Yep.
And if that's the case, and he gets more than like 150, 170 carries with Arthur Smith, we saw how much he split between Tyler Algier and Bijan Robinson. Bijan has a much higher case of taking carries away from Tyler Algier than Najee Harris does, from Jalen Warren. So imagine like if he was splitting it that close with those two guys, I think it's gonna be pretty close with these two. And Jalen Warren is going later than Najee Harris in drafts. And if you're in a PPR league, man, like Jalen Warren, he has RB1 upside if he gets a certain level of opportunity here and is extremely involved in the receiving game. Okay, just keep that in mind. All right, so I think
And
Warren
he's
is an
really
upside
cheap.
pick. But at the very least, dude, like he has a safe floor as well. He's going to be very
Yeah.
involved.
I don't
Right, so
understand what he's doing. I mean, in the ninth round, but then also behind Najee Harris, who's proven to be worlds less efficient. Like it just makes no sense.
the thing is, I think people are excited about Najee because they know how run heavy Arthur Smith is, and there's a world where Najee Harris gets another 300 touches in this offense and is the primary goal line back. I understand that. I don't think the offense is going to be that good to care that much about the goal line role, and we've also seen Tyler Algier be pretty involved on the goal line. I know he's a much bigger back than Jalen Warren. I totally understand, but I don't remember they played Cordell Patterson there too, right? So like I don't
Yeah.
think there's going to be a situation where, by the way, Cordell Patterson is on the Steelers.
He is on the Steelers.
So
Yeah.
and I just saw a report about him like saying like he's not just a special teams player, he's going to have more of a role. That's exactly what we want to hear, and it's Arthur Smith on top of that. So good luck, okay, drafting Najee Harris that early, but. I think Jalen Warren is a clear 0 RB target. Okay, 10th round. Tajay Spears, Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, Blake Corum, Zeke Elliott. I think Blake Corum is also, a little bit of a glorified handcuff as well. So I'm not grabbing him here. I totally understand the league-winning appeal, but Kyrie Williams would have to get hurt for that to happen. Okay, Tajay Spears to me, Brian Robinson, Gus Edwards, like these three guys would be my targets here. Brian Robinson, maybe not on that good of an offense. Gus Edwards on more of a run-heavy offense. Tajay Spears in a split backfield, obviously. We don't know what the backfield in LA is going to look like, right? But I do think that taking the shot on Gus Edwards here makes a lot of sense. Obviously, they have Kamani Vidal, there, but we haven't really heard much about him, right? It's just merely a projection at this point, right? The rookies are starting training camp today on July 16th. Well, this week, depending on what team we're talking about. But, in terms of like who has the safest workload, I'm guessing it's Brian Robinson here. Gus Edwards, like he is the lead back right now. How much work does he actually get this year? There's a lot of questions, right? I think we're getting into like a little bit of the question mark round. If you had to choose one of these three guys, I'm assuming you're not going Zeke or Blake Corum here, but if you had to choose one of the other three guys, who are you going with here? It's not super straightforward to me personally.
It's not super straightforward to me too because they're all their own different type of running back. Like I think Tajay Spears, as long as Tony Pollard is healthy, he's going to be locked in just a battle for touches there, and it'll go either way. But I don't think the upside's there that you're really going to get unless Tony Pollard would get injured. Brian Robinson, I like his role, but like you mentioned, the offense we're not sure. And Gus Edwards is like the exact same thing. Like he can be a touchdown merchant. We saw it last season with the Ravens, but that's on a much better offense. So now you go with the Chargers. I don't want to say the Chargers are going to be terrible, but I just don't know if they're going to be at the point where Gus Edwards, you're going to want to rely on him scoring those touchdowns over and over. Yes, he has the role probably locked down at the goal line. Given Kamani Vidal, he's more of the receiving back. He's not a guy that you're going to use at the goal line. And then also J.K. Dobbins kind of made of glass. So for me, I think if I had to pick one, I go Gus Edwards just because of the touchdown upside. We've seen it before. It's there. And I don't want to just write off the Chargers offense. I'm still not sure it's going to bring Gus Edwards that 13, 14 touchdown upside. But if he gets 8 or 9 touchdowns, I'm okay with that in the 10th round.
Yeah, I think I lean in a similar direction. One thing that is appealing for Brian Robinson, my hope with Brian Robinson is that he's running routes on early downs, right? The other thing is that, with a mobile quarterback, those lanes could be a little bit easier for him to run through, right? A little more open for him, right? So we could see that. So I think we have to kind of keep an eye out on during training camp on this situation. But again, a couple of running backs in the 10th round you can grab. Let me just roll through the rest of these. I have 11th round, Chase Brown, Jerome Ford, and Zach Charbonnet. Would you agree, yes or no, that Jerome Ford would be the pick here pretty easily?
Yeah, he has to be because Nick
Okay.
Chubb might not even
Okay.
be playing to start the season. So we'll see.
Jerome Ford is one of the clear and must-have 0 running backs in all of drafts right now.
Yes.
In the 11th round. Absolutely ridiculous. You can start him as an RB2 in week 1. Okay. 12th round, Jalen Wright, Chuba Hubbard, Kendre Miller, J.K. Dobbins. Not going J.K. Dobbins coming off the Achilles injury. Jalen Wright, he has to depend on one of the running backs in Miami to get hurt. Chuba Hubbard, maybe you could start him for the first couple weeks of the season, but like, what's the upside, especially if Jonathan Brooks is healthy? Kendra Miller is my pick here if I had to pick one of these guys, because Kendra Miller, while you might not have confidence to start him early on in the season, I definitely would not, unless something changes during training camp and we understand that he is the guy. I doubt that happens. This is more of a situation where he could tend to break out as the season goes on. He was a very good prospect, and he could end up taking that early down role as the main runner on the Saints offense, which is, by the way, brand new OC. Okay, so this is a situation where they can come in, evaluate this from scratch, keep Alvin Kamara in his receiving role, but Kendra Miller could potentially not only be their early down back, but the primary goal line back as well. That's the upside for Kendra Miller. You're potentially drafting a running back who can get 250 carries this year. That's the upside, okay?
Exactly.
A lot of downside too. Okay? Like, this is not a lock. This is not a slam dunk. He's just more of a lottery pick who has the pedigree and the opportunity to potentially have a big role this year.
Right. Potentially appreciating asset in Kendra Miller versus a probably depreciating asset in Chuba Hubbard. Like, the trajectory that I'm looking at for Chuba Hubbard is eventually he's going to be at a point where he's not going to be startable. And Kendra Miller, he's going to start where, okay, maybe you might not want to start him, like you mentioned, but then you look up 6 or 7 weeks in the season, suddenly he's trending up. He's on that trajectory where he's going to be very startable later in the season, especially when it matters during the playoffs. That could be a huge boon for your team. So I'm 100% in on this one with Kendra Miller here. I think he's the only one I'm really happy taking in the 12th round.
13th round, you have Rico Dowdle, Ty Chandler, and Marshawn Lloyd. For me, it's Marshawn Lloyd. Again, handcuff situation, but there's been a lot of rumblings where he's going to be more than a handcuff. He's going to be somebody that they're going to give opportunities to. Even the OC said that, yes, we've given A.J. Dillon touches before, but we're looking to give Marshawn Lloyd even more touches than we gave A.J. Dillon and give him even more opportunity, which is exactly what you want to hear if you have Marshawn Lloyd, but not what you want to hear if you have Josh Jacobs. That's why Josh Jacobs is an avoid for me at his price, and why Marshawn Lloyd is a great pick in the 13th round. What if you get a flex in Marshawn Lloyd? That would be amazing, because you can potentially start him in a pinch if you have to, right? Get a couple points or whatever. But then if Josh Jacobs ends up getting hurt, remember, he's reaching that 1,500 carry threshold this year potentially. Marshawn Lloyd could potentially be a big name that you end up with on your bench. Okay.
Yeah.
I think going over what we just went over, the zero RB approach is very tempting, right? You're avoiding a position that gets hurt often early in your drafts. So if you do hit on a few of these running backs later, and you combine that with the elite or near elite wide receivers and tight ends and quarterbacks that you drafted, you could be sitting pretty.